Hello everyone, this is Alex, and okay, so you know I have been a Tim Burton fan for a very long time, and of course along the way I have come to know and observed a lot of Burtonites, as we call ourselves, and while it's great that I'm seeing so many adore his films as much as I do, there is one element I feel that we need to talk to and must be addressed. Tim Burton did not direct Coraline. Tim Burton did not produce Coraline. Tim Burton had absolutely nothing to do with Coraline. But it says it from the director of The Nightmare Before Christmas. It says it right on the DVD. Well, that's another common misconception. Tim Burton did not direct The Nightmare Before Christmas. Both films were in fact directed by Henry Selick. But then of course that does raise the question of why is Tim Burton's name on the cover of The Nightmare Before Christmas? And of course, where did this whole mix-up with Coraline come from? So because of all this, I have decided to dedicate a video to explain how we got here. This is the confusion behind Coraline. We'll first need to travel back to the 1970s, to a room known as A113. Now most animation fans would recognise this, but for those who don't know, you probably feel as though you've seen this before. You probably saw it on the back of Andy's mom's car in Toy Story, the conspiracy theory in WALL-E, the cell that Mr. Incredible was kept in. The reason why it appears in so many Pixar films is because it's a reference to a classroom in Cal Arts, or the California Institution of Arts, for its character animation. And among them were a group of students that went on to have incredible careers in Hollywood, such as Brad Bird, director of The Iron Giant, Ratatouille, The Incredibles movies, John Musker, co-director of The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Moana, and more, Gary Trousdale, co-director of Beauty and the Beast and Hunchback of Notre Dame, and of course, Tim Burton and Henry Selick. The other reason why A113 is so important is not just because it spawned a lot of great filmmakers, but because it brought people who brought Disney back from the dead. You see, ever since Walt Disney's death, the Disney Animation Studio was in big trouble. Many of their films weren't as successful and they were taking longer and longer to make. And considering that animation is what Disney was brought up on, yeah, this was a pretty dark time for the studio. So, what to do? Well, they needed new people. So Disney had decided to fund a program for potential new animators. Burton had described the experience as like being in the army. You're taught by Disney people, you're taught the Disney philosophy. It was a kind of funny atmosphere. However, when it actually came to the animation, the ones who had stuck around since Walt's day were kind of hogging the very juicier role, so to speak, so that didn't exactly give a lot of room for the younger ones. It means that they weren't exactly able to show off their talents and what they could do, and this does include Tim Burton. Because anyone who knows Tim Burton's style knew that he couldn't quite get the Disney style. So there was a point in time where they just let him draw whatever he wanted, but didn't exactly let him be involved in the bigger projects. This led to Tim Burton directing a short stop-motion film called Vincent, and a live-action short called Frankenweenie, and another project that would become one of his most personal, a poem called The Nightmare Before Christmas. The story of Jack Skellington, the king of Halloween Town, who gets very tired of doing the same old thing every year, until he stumbles upon Christmas Town and completely falls in love with it, that he decides he's going to take over Christmas. But considering him and the other residents of Halloween Town only know how to scare, the night before Christmas becomes a nightmare before Christmas. Burton presented the poem to the Disney execs, who rejected it, but he still remained pretty close to it. Eventually, Paul Rubens, who was mostly known for playing Pee Wee Herman, was looking for a director to direct his full-length feature film, Pee Wee's Big Adventure. After being shown the short Frankenweenie, he knew that Tim Burton was the perfect choice to direct it. After the success of that movie, and the success of a black comedy Burton ended up directing next, called Beetlejuice, he was greenlit to direct one of the biggest films of the time, Batman. But even after a successful blockbuster such as Batman, Burton could still show that he could make a success from a low-budget and more personal project, Edward Scissorhands. Disney could now see the draw-in for this new popular filmmaker who used to be one of their employees, and they had the rights to Nightmare Before Christmas. So they approached him and said, yes, you can do it. Finally, he can make the story he always wanted to tell. But there was a catch. He was already signed on to direct the sequel to Batman, Batman Returns. Remember, this was before the internet, so people would flock to the cinemas, pay for a ticket, then watch the Batman trailer, walk out without having actually seen the movie they had paid for. And considering how big the backlash was when Michael Keaton was cast to play Batman, you can only imagine what it might have been like nowadays with Twitter rearing its ugly head. In fact, fun story, Burton wanted to have some time away from all the Batman mania that was going on, so he went off to the middle of nowhere, had, I don't know, like a coffee or a dinner in a diner, and the waitress just happened to be wearing a Batman symbol on her uniform. There was no escape from it. So you can imagine the amount of pressure that was on him to try and make a sequel that was not only as good as the first film, but maybe even better. But Nightmare Before Christmas was such a dream project to him, and Disney were finally letting him have the chance to bring it to life. He was not going to let it go back in the Disney vault again. So he ended up doing the only thing he could think of: get someone else to direct it. As I mentioned before, Henry Selick also went to Cal Arts, and he was clearly a lover of stop motion, which made Burton think that he was the perfect choice to direct it. Henry is a real artist. He's truly the best, says Burton. It's just that even more than with hand-drawn animation, it's hard to find people who are really talented at it. But considering that this was a very personal story, Burton would have the final say in the matter, so he was a director for the director, we'll just say that. I would get a reel, and I had an editing room, and I would edit some shots when I was working on the second Batman movie. While overlooking the footage that was sent to him, Burton mainly worked closely with Danny Elfman in the developmental stage for the story. Danny Elfman started out composing Pee Wee's Big Adventure, so he and Burton have been there pretty much from the start. He also went on to compose Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands, and at the same time as doing Nightmare, he was also doing Batman Returns. When Burton came over and pretty much told him the story and the character of Jack Skellington, Elfman immediately identified with him. So the way they worked was Burton would say a piece of the story, Elfman would then get the idea, start composing, came back a week later, and then next scene, compose, next scene, compose. A lot of back and forth. So to me, Nightmare Before Christmas was really down to the hands of the golden trio, that being Henry Selick, Danny Elfman, and Tim Burton. Henry Selick for leading the animation team and technically making it one of the most impressive stop-motion films. I mean, the camera angles, the editing and the movement, it was something that wasn't really seen in stop-motion back then. Danny Elfman for composing the music and the songs, as well as fleshing out the characters. And of course, Tim Burton for coming up with the story and characters and bringing it to life with his unique style of drawing. However, from Disney's point of view, Tim Burton was the main asset. He was pretty much the filmmaker that was new, that was popular. He made Batman, for crying out loud. So when it came to the marketing, they decided to name it Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. See, look kids, it's Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, the same guy who did Batman. It's amazing! Watch our movie now! Now, as far as having Tim Burton's name in the title, this has never bothered me. This isn't the first time that we've had authors' names in the title of movies. Even authors that have been dead and clearly had no involvement in the movie making. It just so happens that the writer of this movie happened to be a very popular director at the time. But even if his name wasn't in the title, I still think people would believe to this day that he directed it. I mean, look at it. It's covered in Burton's fingerprints. His drawing style, his characters, the German expressionistic style of Halloween Town, the Danny Elfman score, voice actors that he's worked with before, a protagonist that feels out of place, a beloved dog character, a theme of stitching, and an ending that's neither entirely happy, but neither entirely sad. To me, even though he didn't direct it, Nightmare Before Christmas is a Tim Burton film. So why does this lead to the whole confusion with Coraline? Because, I'll be honest, I fell for it originally. I mean, it's stop motion, it's got a spooky vibe to it, a sort of modern fairy tale-like story. The story is about a girl named Coraline who recently moves with her very neglectful parents and shares a sort of apartment with very annoying neighbours. She eventually comes across a little door that leads her to almost a mirror-like world to her own world. The only difference is the people there give her as much attention as she likes and makes everything fun. The only difference is all the characters have buttons for eyes, and there's something more sinister at play. Now, I did see the film when it was released in cinemas, and once I had finally discovered who Tim Burton was, I went and watched it again, and something felt off about it. It didn't exactly feel like a Tim Burton film. I mean, compare the designs of the puppets to, say, Corpse Bride, which was his most recent stop-motion film at the time. Doesn't exactly look like a Tim Burton sketch, does it? So why did they market Coraline with "from the director of The Nightmare Before Christmas"? Well, that's because Henry Selick had only made 2 other full-length movies at that point. James and the Giant Peach, a sort of half live-action, half stop-motion film, and Monkey Bone, a black comedy live-action film. And even though Nightmare Before Christmas was a modest hit at the box office, it wasn't exactly making the same amount of money that the other films were doing. Keep in mind, this was during the Disney Renaissance. However, as years went on, the popularity for Nightmare, I don't know where it started, but it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It got a re-release in 3D, and Disney put it under their animation logo compared to before, where it was under Touchstone Pictures. Because yes! Nightmare Before Christmas has always been a Disney classic! Yes, it has! So yeah, from a marketing point of view, it does make sense to advertise the fact that he was involved in Nightmare Before Christmas, and they're not wrong. I mean, they used a nightmare for part of their marketing for the Corpse Bride trailer, but the difference is, they said, from Tim Burton, the creator of The Nightmare Before Christmas. Maybe it would have been better if Coraline was marketed as from Henry Selick, director of Nightmare Before Christmas, because that would get people talking. Wait, who's Henry Selick? I thought Tim Burton directed The Nightmare Before Christmas. Okay, let me go and IMDb that. Oh, I see. Okay, he wrote and produced Nightmare, but Henry directed it. Oh, okay, fair enough then. Obviously, it just came down to how to advertise Coraline, especially since parents were already biting their nails that it looked like a dark film for their kids. And since Burton was an acclaimed director and Henry's other films, while James the Giant Peach certainly has a cult following, it was never up to the levels that Nightmare eventually reached. Whenever people bring it up with Burton in an interview, he usually goes like, "It does bother me a bit. People thought I made Coraline. Henry is a great filmmaker, but when they say something, they should have to say the person's name. It's very misleading, and that's not fair to the consumer." So here I am spreading the truth to my fellow consumers, and hopefully this has cleared up the confusion behind Coraline. I would like to dedicate this video to Henry Selick, who is a brilliant filmmaker and clearly does not get enough credit. Not just for directing Coraline, but also for collaborating to make Nightmare the masterpiece that it is. And much like Tim Burton, Wes Anderson, Nick Park, Aardman Studios and Leica Studios, Selick is clearly trying to keep stop motion alive. So thank you.